Maya Bennett tried to budget 7 separate times before one of them actually stuck. Not 7 half-hearted attempts either. 7 real ones, each with a fresh app downloaded, a fresh spreadsheet color-coded with real hope behind it, and each one abandoned within a matter of weeks, sometimes days. By the 7th failure, she had started to believe the problem was her. Not enough discipline, not enough willpower, just another person who was simply bad with money. Here is what nobody told Maya, and what almost nobody tells anyone standing exactly where she was standing. The problem was never her discipline. The problem was that every budget she tried was built to fail before she ever opened the app. Somewhere around 74 million Americans set a financial goal at the start of a given year, and within a few months, the overwhelming majority of those goals have already quietly died. Not because the people were lazy, because the systems they picked were never built for how real humans actually behave under stress, temptation, and a paycheck that does not always show up the same size twice. This is the story of what those 7 failures actually taught Maya, what changed on the 8th try, and the exact method that finally turned a budget from a punishment into something she still uses today. Along the way, we are going to pull 13 specific, practical lessons out of her journey, the kind you can actually start using today, not someday. If you have ever downloaded an app, used it for 11 days, and quietly deleted it out of shame, this one is for you. Before we get into failure number 1, drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from and which failed budget attempt you are currently stuck on. We read every single one, and if you have not already, hit subscribe now so the rest of this story lands in your feed. Let's start with failure number 1, because it is the most common one there is, and you have almost certainly lived through a version of it yourself. Maya opened a spreadsheet, the kind with categories for everything down to the last cent. Groceries, gas, coffee, entertainment, miscellaneous. She built it on a Sunday night in Columbus, Ohio, feeling genuinely proud of how thorough it looked. By Wednesday, she had already forgotten to log a $12 lunch. By the following Sunday, 3 days of purchases were missing entirely, and rather than fill in the gaps, she simply closed the tab and never opened it again. This is the perfectionist trap, and it catches more people than any other single mistake in personal finance. A budget that requires you to log every transaction by hand, in real time, forever, is not a budget. It is a part-time, unpaid job, and like any job nobody actually wants, people quit it the moment it stops feeling urgent. Lesson 1, and this is one you can practice starting today. If your tracking system needs more than 2 minutes a day to maintain, it will not survive a busy week. The fix is not more discipline, it is a simpler system. Before you open any app or spreadsheet today, ask yourself honestly whether you could keep it up on your worst day, not your best one. If the answer is no, simplify it right now, before you lose a single week to it. Failure number 2 came a few months later, and this one had a name most people recognize instantly: the cash envelope system. Maya pulled out actual paper envelopes, labeled them by category, and physically divided her paycheck into stacks of bills. For about 2 weeks, it worked beautifully. Then a Tuesday came where the grocery envelope ran dry 3 days before payday, and there was still dinner to figure out. She borrowed from the entertainment envelope, told herself she would pay it back, and never did. Within a month, the whole system had quietly dissolved into one big envelope she stopped labeling altogether. The cash envelope method genuinely works for a lot of people, and we are not here to trash it. But it has one specific weakness. It assumes your expenses land in perfectly predictable weekly chunks, and real life is rarely that tidy. Lesson 2. And you can build this into whatever system you already use. Add a small buffer category before you need one, 5 or 10% of your flexible spending set aside with no label at all, just breathing room. When the grocery money runs short on a Tuesday, that buffer absorbs the gap instead of a broken promise to yourself absorbing it. Failure 3 was the extreme reset, the one almost everyone tries right after a bad month makes them panic. No eating out, not once, for an entire month. No subscriptions, no small pleasures of any kind. Maya lasted 11 days before a stressful shift at work ended with a $22 takeout order and a wave of guilt so heavy she gave up on the whole month entirely. This is what behavioral economists call the abstinence violation effect, and it shows up constantly in dieting research long before anyone ever applied it to money. The moment you break an all-or-nothing rule, the entire rule feels broken, so the brain reasons that the whole project might as well be abandoned. One skipped grocery log or one impulse purchase should never be able to detonate an entire month of progress. Yet with an all-or-nothing budget, that is exactly the design flaw baked in from day one. Lesson 3. And this is a mindset shift you can practice the very next time you slip. Treat one off-plan purchase as a single data point, not a verdict on the whole month. Say it out loud if you have to. One $22 order does not erase 11 good days. Then close the app and move on with the plan exactly as it was. Failure 4 was the popular finance app, the automatic kind that links to your bank and sorts every purchase into a category for you. On paper, this should have solved everything Maya struggled with in Failure 1. In practice, the app misclassified half her purchases, buried the dashboard under features she never asked for, and sent so many notifications that she started ignoring all of them, including the ones that actually mattered. Automation genuinely helps, but automation without a plan behind it is just a faster way to watch your own habits reflected back at you, without ever actually changing them. Lesson 4. Worth practicing before you download anything new. Decide your plan by hand first, even roughly, on paper or in the Notes app on your phone. 3 numbers is enough. What has to go out, what you want to spend, what you want to save. Only once that plan exists does a tool have anything real to enforce. Failure 5 was borrowed from a coworker who swore by it. The strict 50-30-20 split. 50% to needs, 30% to wants, 20% to savings. It is a genuinely respected framework, one that shows up in financial planning circles constantly, and for a lot of steady salaried households it works well as written. For Maya, working partly on commission with a rent payment that alone ate past 50% of her income most months, the ratio simply did not fit her actual life. Rather than adjust the numbers to her situation, she assumed the method itself was the problem, and dropped it within 3 weeks. Lesson 5, and it applies to any percentage-based rule you have ever tried. Treat the ratio as a starting draft, not a law. Today, take whatever framework you have heard of, 50-30-20 or anything else, and actually check it against your real rent and your real paycheck. If it does not fit, adjust the numbers. Do not throw out the whole idea because the default settings were wrong for you. Failure 6 is the one Maya still cringes about the most, the guilt spiral. After failing 5 times, she built a budget soaked in self-punishment, tiny allowances for anything enjoyable, harsh mental notes every time she slipped, a running tally that felt less like planning and more like keeping score against herself. It lasted about 10 days before the stress of it became worse than the disorganized spending it was meant to fix. Lesson 6. And this one is about language as much as numbers. A budget you cannot look at without dread is not sustainable, no matter how accurate it is. Practice this today. Rename your categories in neutral language. No more labels like wasted money or bad spending. Call it what it is: groceries, gas, going out. Neutral words keep you looking at the number instead of hiding from it. The last piece, and arguably the one that mattered most emotionally, was building in permission to be imperfect on purpose. Maya set a small, guilt-free buffer inside her flexible spending category, specifically for the unplanned $12 lunch or the impulse coffee, the exact kind of purchase that had detonated her 3rd attempt entirely. By planning for imperfection instead of pretending it would never happen, one off-plan purchase stopped being a crisis and became simply part of the plan working exactly as designed. This single change is the difference between a budget that bends and a budget that shatters the first time real life shows up. Let's watch how this actually played out over the following months. because the real test of any system is not the first good week. It is what happens when life throws something unexpected at it. 2 months in, Maya's car needed new brakes, an unplanned $400 repair. Under any of her first 7 attempts, this would have been the moment the whole budget collapsed, the same way it had 6 times before. This time, roughly a third of the repair came directly out of the sinking fund she had been quietly feeding for 8 weeks. The rest came from flexible spending, trimmed slightly for the following 2 weeks to rebalance. No panic, no credit card at 24% interest, no guilt spiral. Just a system absorbing a normal, predictable disruption, exactly the way it was built to. A similar test came for a friend of hers, Priya, in Raleigh, North Carolina, who adopted the same 3-category approach after watching Maya's turnaround up close. Priya's version of the 7 failures looked almost identical in shape, if not in exact detail. An overly complicated app, an all-or-nothing grocery ban, a borrowed system that never quite matched her income. What finally worked for Priya was the same underlying shift, fewer categories, a weekly instead of daily check-in, and a sinking fund built specifically around the twice-yearly work trips her job required. 6 months in, an unexpected dental bill landed the week before payday. She covered it without a second thought, pulling from a bucket that had been waiting for exactly this kind of moment since the month she started. A third example, this one from Derek in Austin, Texas, shows the same principle applied to a completely different income situation: irregular freelance income rather than a steady paycheck. Derek's version of paying himself first meant calculating a conservative average across his lowest earning months, treating that number as his fixed baseline, and routing anything earned above it directly into savings and the sinking fund before he ever had the chance to let a good month convince him a bad one was not coming. Freelance and commission-based income fail traditional budgets constantly, precisely because those budgets assume a steady number arriving on a steady date. Building around your lowest realistic month, rather than your best one, is the adjustment that keeps the whole system standing, even when the income itself is unpredictable. What ties Maya, Priya, and Derek together is not a shared spreadsheet template or a shared app. It is a shared underlying structure, a short, honest tracking period before any rules get built, a small number of categories instead of a sprawling list nobody can maintain, a sinking fund for the expenses that are predictable in total even if the exact date is not, a weekly review instead of a daily one, automation that removes the moment of temptation entirely, and a small built-in allowance for being human. None of these 5 pieces is complicated on its own. Almost nobody fails a budget because the math was too hard. People fail budgets because the system demanded a version of themselves that does not exist in real life, tired Tuesdays and unexpected Wednesdays included. There is a quieter shift that happened underneath all of this, one that mattered just as much as any single number. Somewhere around the 4th month, Maya noticed she had stopped dreading her banking app. Checking the balance stopped feeling like opening a bill she could not afford, and started feeling closer to checking the weather, useful information, nothing more, nothing less. That change in relationship is the part almost nobody talks about when they describe successful budgeting, and it may be the most important outcome of the entire 8th attempt. A system you can actually look at without flinching is a system you will actually keep using, and a system you keep using for years is worth infinitely more than a perfect one you abandon after 11 days. If you are sitting somewhere between failure 2 and failure 7 of your own right now, here is the honest, unglamorous truth this whole story keeps circling back to. The number of times you have failed at budgeting says almost nothing about your character and almost everything about whether the system you were handed was ever built to survive contact with your actual life. Let's run back through all lessons one more time, quickly, because hearing them together is often when one of them finally clicks. Simplify your tracking until it survives a bad week. Build in a buffer before you need one. Treat a single slip as one data point, not a verdict. Decide your plan by hand before you automate it. Adjust any percentage rule to fit your real numbers. Use neutral language instead of a scoreboard. Look at your balance even when it is uncomfortable. Track for 30 days before building a single rule. Hunt down forgotten recurring charges. Shrink your categories down to 3. Calculate your sinking fund number tonight. Lock in one weekly check-in at a fixed time. And set up one automatic transfer today, no matter how small. Maya still uses a version of that 8th budget today. Years later, refined slightly here and there, but built on the same 13 ideas. You do not need to adopt all of them at once to see this work. Pick just one. Maybe it is the 30-day tracking period with no rules attached. Maybe it is shrinking your categories down to 3. Maybe it is the sinking fund math you could do on a napkin tonight, or the single automatic transfer you could set up before you even close this video. Whichever one you pick, that is the one that matters, because the budget that finally works is never the most complicated one, it is the first one you actually keep. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from, and which one of these 13 lessons you are going to practice starting today. We want to hear the real answer, not the impressive one.